Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Martinez. I'm the President and CEO of the Latino Community Foundation, and I want to welcome you all to this webinar and your interest in the Adelante capacity building initiative that we will be talking about today. But before we get started, we have some housekeeping that we want to go over. So first of all, we are offering interpretation. So if you want to be able to go ahead and listen to this webinar in Spanish, you are more than welcome to do so. I will go ahead and pass it over to Lynette Garcia, who is our interpreter today, who will give you instructions of how to be able to connect and listen to the webinar in Spanish. Lynette?
Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Buenos días a todos. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much to Adelante Colorado for believing in language justice. Muchas gracias, Adelante Colorado, por creer en la justicia del lenguaje. El día de hoy estaré interpretando de español a inglés. Today I'll be interpreting from English to Spanish. If there's any other language in this space, folks want to make sure that that is interpreted in this space, I would please urge you to share it with your organizers. Si hay alguna otra lengua en el espacio que ustedes quieran poder practicar en este espacio, por favor los invito a que le dejen saber a sus organizadores. Today, as soon as interpretation is turned on, there's going to be a glip at the bottom of your screen. En cuanto se prenda la interpretación, va a haber un globo pequeño abajo en su pantalla. Ustedes pueden escoger español o inglés. You can choose English or Spanish. I do turn off my interpretation, but at any point, just make sure that you're in charge of making sure that you're keeping up with the pace of everything that's going on, so I can capture everything that is being said. Si les comparto, por favor, que tengan que estén atentos a al paso de la voz para que yo pueda poder capturar todo lo que esté diciendo. I think we're ready for interpretation. Creo que ya estamos listos para interpretación. Gracias.
Gracias, Lynette. Thank you very much for that. I want to now just move on. This session is being recorded, so just to let you know that. And we will be offering this recording on the Adelante website page of our website as of next week. So if you want to be able to go back to it, you're more than welcome to. Also, we will be going through a PowerPoint presentation today, and you can find a link to the slides both in English and in Spanish in the chat. And Priscilla will be putting that up in a minute, so you'll be able to go ahead and download those slides as well. Today's format, I will be going over the Adelante history, why capacity building, the structure, eligibility, application process, and key dates. I'm going to try and go through this in about 20 minutes so that we can leave enough time for Q&A. Most of the information that I will be sharing with you is available on our website or on the Adelante page, and that was also available to you in the email that you received from Priscilla. So not a lot of new information, but just being able to go ahead and provide some clarity for you. By doing that, it'll give us ample time to go ahead and engage in some Q&A after. And when we get to the Q&A part, I will just let you know about how we're going to go ahead and do that so that we can answer as many questions as possible. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your page to go ahead and write your question down. That way you don't forget it. Because at the end, when we start the Q&A, we're going to take the questions that are written down first to be able to expedite as many questions as possible. And then if we have time, we'll open it up to verbal questions. So thank you again for being with us and for wanting to learn a little bit more about the Adelante Colorado initiative. Next slide. The initiative came about when a group of organizations and executive directors who were meeting, who were calling themselves the Latino Latinx collective, about how do we address capacity building within Latino nonprofits. and then they involved LCFC. We got together, we received a planning grant, and with about 5 executive directors representing small to large organizations and organizations throughout the state, went through a very lengthy planning process over a year to really come up to see how best we can go ahead and address capacity building with Latino-led, Latino-serving organizations, and kind of like the need and the why of, why this has to be done, but with a very much of a cultural context. Less than 2% of foundation dollars go to Latino-led, Latino-serving organizations, and a much smaller percentage of that is for capacity building. And so as organizations of color, Latino organizations, look at running and building these critical institutions in communities, we're always trying to do that through more of a Band-Aid approach, or we're under-resourced, and we don't have the resources that other organizations sometimes have because of the funding that they receive, and the inequities in philanthropy and in funding. So in order for us to go ahead and really build up our organizations and really sustain them, that's how kind of like the Adelante capacity building initiative came about. So I want to thank all the folks who participated in the planning pieces of it, helping with the fundraising pieces of it, and now getting to the point of finally launching the initiative. So as we look at like building capacity of organizations, and looking at this like continued journey, Latino organizations very rarely have the opportunity to have the resources they need to build their organizations in a very methodical way and having the resources to do that. We're usually having to go ahead and figure out how we kind of like piece things together over years, and that's a lot of work. You've all done it, I've done it, and as we look at that, not only is it a lot of work, but it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of figuring things out, and sometimes it's doesn't allow us to be more strategic of how we build out our organizations. So this initiative is really about how do we support organizations as they build their foundations and build their organizations to really be some really magnificent, wonderful organizations in their community. Next slide. So, next slide, Priscilla. Okay. So the Adelante Colorado initiative is about moving communities forward through a 3-year comprehensive capacity building project that will support the capacity needs of 20 Latino-led, Latino-serving organizations throughout this period through leadership development, training, and grants. So at like a nutshell, that's what the Adelante project is about. We're really looking to help organizations build strong foundations, build strong capacities within their organizations to do some great work in the community. Not that they're not doing it, but to be able to help them enhance that and taking their organizations to another level. The way that this 3-year project is going to look like or be structured is like through a 3-phase approach. Next slide, Priscilla. Phase 1 is about kind of like the mindset of the organizational leadership and preparing folks for this journey of building capacity. And really, what does that mean? As you build capacities, you go through, organizational change. What does it mean to take your organization through that kind of change, that kind of transformation? And so, and within that, a lot of things come up, everywhere from conflict resolution to strategy development to personnel issues to a lot of things. And it's really helping to prepare that leader for this journey that they will be embarking on as they look to build capacities for their organization to be able to take their organization to this next level. Phase 2 then is really about kind of understanding kind of like a theoretical framework then for capacity building, understanding what your current capacities are through organizational audits that we'll be able to provide you all with, to really audit your organization and understand where you're at and kind of like where you want to go within some certain capacities. So we'll just take, for example, maybe fund development, and to really understand where you are with that. Where is it that you want to grow within fund development? Is it individual donors? Is it corporations? Is it foundations? To really understand that, so that you can then build the capacities and create a strategy based upon where you want to go. So that phase 2 is about that theoretical framework. It's about doing the audits within your organization, and it's about developing your plan, your strategic plan for building your capacities within your organization. And then phase 3 is actually, implementing those new systems, those whatever it is that you're looking to build, building those capacities. So those are kind of like the 3 phases over the 3 years of the initiative. Next slide, Priscilla. As we look at this, we're looking to invest in organizations that are growing. So if you look at the life cycle of a nonprofit, from startup, begin, grow, sustain, decline, startup, adolescence, mature, stagnant, defunct, we're looking at these orange highlighted areas that you see on the slide. We're looking for organizations that are in the growth stages of the organization. And growth stage doesn't mean they're at the beginnings. It could be an organization that's been around for 50 years. It could be an organization that's been around for 3 years. We're not looking at really supporting organizations that are already there, that have all the capacities, that are doing extremely well, and things are great. And we know that sometimes organizations go through a decline, but sometimes as they go through a decline, they're coming back to renew themselves. And we're also looking at helping organizations renew. So when you look at the life cycle and you see the highlighted areas here, from the growth to sustain and the renewal, that's kind of like where we're looking to go ahead and support organizations. Next slide, Priscilla. We're also looking at supporting organizations that are community-centered, organizations that are looking at really supporting the work of a community jointly. We're not looking at organizations who think they have all the answers for the community and are doing things for the community. We're looking at organizations that engage the community, that are doing things with the community, that understand that community participation, that have respect for culture, history, language, and aspirations of the people who live there, and definitely acknowledge race, class, gender, economic inequities, and other forms of social justice, and are coming together with community to address those issues. So we're really looking at organizations that work with their communities. At the end, next slide, Priscilla. At the end, there'll be a lot of benefits that an organization will receive from this. Aside from the development, the financial resources, we're going to be bringing in some great speakers and trainers throughout this period. But really at the end of it, it's what you put in. So organizations that are selected, it's really about what you're going to put in. We're going to try and provide you with an array of resources to really figure out how you can best use those resources to build, rebuild, recover your organizations, especially after COVID, to see where it is that you want to take them. So at the end of the day, we're going to really provide you with an array of resources, but it's going to be up to the organization of how they end up using those resources. And so a lot of benefits will be offered. And I think to the extent that one really wants to take advantage of them, they'll be there for you all. Next slide. Just really quickly, the project timeline is about a 3-year project timeline for the project. We will make our decisions of the candidates by May or in May. It's a three-phase capacity building approach that I shared with you. And kind of like our grant sizes per organization will be $75,000 to about $150,000. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to break up the award. So let's say you got 75,000. It's not like you're going to get 25,000 for each phase, because we know that there's going to probably be more work that's going to be needed, more investments in phases 2 and phases 3. So we'll be working with each organization more individually of how we break up the total award over the period of those 3 years. So it's not that we're going to have one size fits all. We will be working with those organizations selected to figure things out. Next slide. So eligibility for the Adelante project is at 501 Colorado-based nonprofit, 3 years in operation, budgets of at least 150, devote at least 51% of their services to the Latino community, be an organization that is Latino-led, and our criteria for that is executive director is Latino, 51% of the management team is Latino, and 51% of the board is Latino. Have a paid executive director, and identify a participating board member to attend some of our trainings. Now, we know that there's organizations at various levels. We know that some organizations operate through a fiscal agent, and that's fine. So if you have a fiscal sponsor that you've been working with, that's perfectly fine. We know that some organizations may be teetering that, we're not quite 3 years now, but if you've been planning and working on stuff, we'll look at that. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, you can ask for a waiver for any of the above requirements, but I'll just be honest with you, if you're looking for a waiver for each of those bullets, you're probably not gonna be one of those organizations that gets selected. I think one of the things that we really wanted to do throughout this whole process is really look at equity. And sometimes when you have like a whole matrix of eligibility and sticking to certain criteria, that sometimes does not create equity. And so I think as we look at the selection process and how we work with folks and how we bring them on and how we do this whole process is really looking at equity and seeing how best we bring together a group of about 20 organizations who can come together and really do some great work for their communities. The selection process, next slide, Priscilla, is a 2-part process. So part 1 is kind of like this submission of a letter of conocimiento. Some people sometimes say letter of intent, why you're intending to apply, but for us, we're seeing it more of a letter of conocimiento, or really getting to know your organization and where you're at. So it's a letter that we're not asking for a lot more information, but when you go onto our grants platform, there's some logistical information that you have to fill out, your contact information about your organization, in addition to some, checking of some boxes on those eligibility requirements. And then there's 4 questions in the letter of conocimiento and 1 optional. As you look at that question, people are like, well, how long will it take me to fill out this letter of conocimiento? It's really depends on where you're at within your organization. If you're an organization that has already been having conversations with your staff, with your board about where you want to go ahead and take your organization, it shouldn't take you very long to fill out the letter of conocimiento. But if you haven't had those conversations within your organization, within your board, it may take you longer to go ahead and answer some of those questions. But that's part 1 of the application process, is this letter of conocimiento. It has to be submitted by Friday, March 19th by 5 p.m. And we do have a hard deadline on that. Just because of timing and everything coming together, we are asking that you submit your letter of conocimiento by that day. Like I said, it shouldn't take you very long if you already have a sense of where you want to go with your organization. But if you don't, it may take you longer to go ahead and fill out that process. We then will have a review committee who will be reviewing all those letters of conocimiento, and then we will invite a subset of those applicants for an interview. That's the second part of the process, of the selection process. If you are invited to go ahead and participate in an interview, prior to the interview, there'll be some documents that we will ask of you. These documents are stuff that you already have, your year-end financials, your 501c3, very basic information. We're not asking information that you'll probably have to go ahead and create or put together for this. It's just information that you probably already have, such as also like your board list, for example. And then you'll have, we'll schedule a 60-minute interview with the executive director and at least one board member. And we will give you a set of questions prior to the interview. After the interviews are all done, we will then go ahead and make our final selection of the candidates. Next slide. Key dates to remember through the selection process is that your letter of conocimiento is due Friday, March 19th. We will be notifying applicants for interviews the week of April 9th. Again, not every applicant will be asked to go on to part 2 of the selection process. Between April 19th and May 7th, we will do 60-minute interviews. And in May, we will make our final selections. We're hoping to go ahead and have that done by around the middle of May. And we will have our first cohort meeting on Friday, June 11th. So you should just pencil that in if you're going to be applying, because if you are selected, that is going to be like a mandatory meeting Friday, June 11th. And so that said, I hope I was able to provide you some information and go through that so that we can then leave time for Q&A. So the way that we're going to go ahead and do it, use the Q&A feature down below. Diana will go ahead and read the questions out loud so that everybody is able to go ahead and hear that. And then I will go ahead and answer the questions. If by the time, if we're able to get through all the questions submitted through the Q&A, we will then open it up to verbal questions from the group. So with that, I'll turn it over to Diana.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Carlos. We have quite a few questions on eligibility and eligibility waivers. So maybe you can speak a little bit more to that. And specifically, this question comes from Leah. Like, what's the process of the waivers, and are there certain eligibility elements that we are more willing to waive?
So in the application, it will go ahead and just ask you if you're asking for a waiver. So you will just go ahead and indicate that on the application. There is a fourth question, a fifth optional question in the letter of conocimiento. And you should use that optional question to be able to jot down, why you're asking for a waiver for that eligibility piece. Like I said earlier, we're trying to be as equitable and as fair, but if you're asking for several waivers, that might not be, you might not be the, kind of like the kind of organization we're looking for at this point. This is a pilot project. We're hoping that all goes very well so that we can continue this project after this cohort. And hopefully we can probably do this every 3 years to be able to provide this. So if maybe not now, maybe later, we're also looking to go ahead, if you're not selected to be part of this, to provide other capacity building support for organizations, but that is still under development at this point.
Okay, so those questions are marked as done. We have a few more questions on eligibility and waivers, but I'm going to go after those in a little. I'm going to come to those in a minute. The next question, is there a max budget amount for the organization? Is there an idea, for example, 150, 500,000 or more, or is it pretty open-ended?
Is this for the organizational size or for what they'll be asking? So if it's organizational size, there's no limit to the how large the organization is. So there's, but there is a base of at least $150,000 operating budget for the organization.
Okay, Violeta, I hope that answered the question there. And the next, so some of these questions are pretty specific, but could the opportunity be used to build the capacity of a program within a larger organization, or is it designated for overall organizational capacity? And can you clarify if all the Latino-led criteria must be met to qualify, or if the organization only qualifies under one criteria, should the waiver be requested?
Okay, so let me go ahead and take some of those. So with respect to criteria around, I think, Latino-led, Latino serving, is that if you're an organization whose, I'll give you an example, whose board of directors is 10% Latino and 90% other, and you're asking for a waiver, that might not be probably what we'll be looking at, you know, as a favorable organization. If you're kind of like 45% Latinos and you have a plan to go ahead and bring in more Latinos, then we may go ahead and take a look at that and say, okay, and do that. And you can explain that on that optional area that you have to go ahead and respond to that. So it's depending where you're at. If you're an organization that's working on, or you have a budget of $140,000 and you're almost there at 150, and you have plans to do that within the next year, we'll take that into consideration. But if you're an organization at, you know, $25,000 a year, we're probably not going to go ahead and look at that as a favorable candidate at this time. What was the first part of the question? Oh, yeah. Can you look at it by program or by organization? We're really looking at building organizational capacity because we know that having strong foundations for an organization allows you to grow any program. And so we're really looking at building the infrastructure and the foundation of organizations to be able to build upon that and not focus on a program that's well run and an organization that may not have the abilities or the capacities, because we have seen from time to time also where you have a really great program, but the organization sometimes does not have the capacity to really support that program the way they need to, or that program has gone way beyond to do more things than the organization can do. And sometimes those programs end up having to become their own organization. So we're really looking at building the organizational foundation.
Okay, thank you. Priscilla has also been typing in some answers to some of the questions in the chat. So if people are curious about other questions that are happening in the chat, in the Q&A box, feel free to open up that box. And we have a couple more program questions. So a question from Aaron is, what our program of, well, we are a program of a 501c3 that is Latino-led, but JHA, also Latino-led, has its own directors. Would JHA or the Justice and Heritage Academy or Conejos Clean Water apply?
So I guess my question is your program, under another organization as more like a fiscal agent, and that you're using them, and that you have also like your own maybe board that you work with and so forth? Or are you really integrated as part of a program of an organization? If you're really integrated as a program of another organization, then it's that organization that we're looking at, not your program. If you're kind of like a program that is more like using an organization as their fiscal agent, and that you have your own board or advisory board, and you're working to the hopes of becoming your own organization, and this opportunity actually helps to lead towards that, then yes, we would look at that very favorably.
Okay, we have a few questions on how the funds would be used, if they would be general operating or if they would be restricted.
So the funds are, and that's we're going to go ahead and work with different with the organizations on this, and we're going to allow just a lot of flexibility. And I say that because sometimes, you know, we get like capacity building grants, and the foundation or the institution who's giving that dollars is like, it can only be spent on like planning this or building that capacity. And what kind of like gets to me sometimes is that you can't use any of that money for like staffing, or, you know, or other things that's critical. We're going to be open to that. And so if, you know, if we look at, you know, someone's award, and as we're looking at that, I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be just general operating support, do whatever you want with it. But it's going to be like, where do you want to use the money? If you want to use it for staffing, if you want to, we're going to be very open to whatever you want to use the money for, but we want to know how you're going to use the money. So it's not kind of just like a blank check, do whatever you want, but it's like, how do you want to use this money? You know, do you want to use it for staffing? Do you want to use it for buying equipment? Do you want to use it for buying, you know, technology, for consultants, for a coach, for whatever? We're open to all that, and all that's fine. We just want to know, you know, how it is that you're looking at that, because remember, this is a pilot project, and as you do your work, and we're supporting you to have as much flexibility in doing that, we're also learning of how best to support Latino organizations. So as you do your work, we're also learning, you're learning, so that we can take that learning also and use that to be able to continue this, this project, but also really learn about best ways to support Latino organizations for the future. So I hope that answered that question.
Okay, and a follow-up to that question is, in terms of the being part of the cohorts, how many cohort meetings will there be, and are they going to be in person or virtual?
So we're looking at, and I'm sorry I didn't go over that, but it's in our other material. But we're looking to do about 6 cohort meetings a year. They will be done, at least for this year, we're looking to do it virtually until we won't do anything that jeopardizes anybody's health or safety. When we're able to get together in person, then we'll go ahead and be able to do that. And our cohort meetings, when we do them in person, we will pay for all expenses, travel expenses and everything for people to come together wherever they're coming from. So we do plan to do a little bit of both virtual as well as in person. But for this year, probably most of it's going to be virtual.
Thank you. Okay, so let me mark those as done. If we would like to talk to someone at the foundation prior to the letter deadline, with whom shall we speak?
Yeah, so on all the information that's been out there and so forth, you can go ahead and email Priscilla. And we ask that you submit an email, and I'll tell you why. Because by submitting your email with your questions and us responding, we can then start creating like a fact sheet that we can go ahead and start updating and having it on our website, so that we can post all that information there. Because you may have, someone else may have the same question. So so you're welcome to go ahead and reach out to Priscilla. If it's more of a confidential question, we will keep that confidential and we will not share that. But also any questions that we receive that we'll post up in our fact sheet, we're not going to go ahead and attribute who sent it or anything like that. We'll go ahead and keep that confidential.
Okay. The auditing process, what will that be like, and the process as a whole?
So the auditing process really comes in. It's not like auditing your organization for compliance of anything. It's being able to go ahead and audit your organization around the capacities that you're looking to go ahead and build. So I'll give you another example. So let's say one of the things you want to go ahead and do is build your capacity around board engagement. Okay, so the audit that would like take place in something like that is how is your board currently engaged? And so we audit kind of like what your practices are, maybe your governance structure, your bylaws, so that we can then say, okay, if this is where you're at now and this is a base, okay, how do we want to go ahead and grow those capacities for your organization so that in 3 years you're more like this? So that audit provides us baseline information for you so that you really understand what your current capacities are, so that as you're looking to put your plan together for building your capacities, you know how to go ahead and put that in place and know how to grow your capacities over time to get to where you needed to go ahead and be at. So that's the kind of audits we're talking about. We're not talking about going in there and doing audits for compliance or whatever. This audit information is for you to understand where your capacities are and where you want to go ahead and build from that.
Thank you. We are trying to become a fiscal agent for a Latinx leadership group. 100% of its members are Latinx. Can we still apply?
Well, it depends where you are in that life cycle. And I'll go back to that life cycle. If you're at the very beginning stages, this is probably not the program for you right now. So we're really looking at organizations that are more in the growth stage, that are already gone through, putting things together, so forth, and are more in the growth stage. So those are the type of organizations we're looking for.
Okay. And one more question. Are the award amounts of 75 to 150,000 overall award amounts over 3 years? Or is that the award amount per phase? For example, $75,000, $100,000, $120,000?
Yeah, so the 75 to 150,000 is over the 3-year period. So we right now have about $2 million to invest in about 20 organizations. And so it's over that 3-year period, in addition to all the training support that we will be providing organizations. So in phase 1, where it's more about leadership development, so let's say you got awarded again $100,000, that maybe in phase 1, you're not going to use up a lot of your $100,000 just yet. But in phase 2, as you're doing your audits and you're maybe working with some consultants and whatever, you may say, okay, I need more money here. But then you'll say, but as we then start building the capacities, we need some new technology, we need this, we need that, we may need to hire a staff person or whatever. So I'm going to save more of my bulk of my money in phase 3, then we will go ahead and do that. And I don't want to say it's going to be the exact same thing for every organization, because again, every organization is different. And I think that's what we're trying to go ahead and do and respect in this process, is really working with organizations where they're at, and helping them from where they're at and how they want to grow and develop those capacities, and not try to put everybody into one box and everybody has to follow the same thing. So we're trying to be very flexible within this process. But I will also say to you that as we go through this, there are also other foundations who have their eyes on this project. And so we're hoping that either through us or other entities, we may be able to bring additional resources to you all or help you leverage this initiative and your participation in this Adelante project with other funders. I think that's one of the things that, that I hope happens here, is that as we work with those 20 organizations, it's not about just seeing just the resources within Adelante, but how do we help you leverage other resources? How do we help you leverage your plans for capacity building to be able to leverage additional resources from other foundations that you're probably already working with, or other new ones as well? And so, think about the leveraging factor that this will have on your organization as well.
Okay. Priscilla's typing an answer to one question, so I'll leave that. And then, will the annual award amounts be determined by the grantee, or will LCFC make that determination based on the applicant's proposal and progress?
So in the first part of the application, we do not ask about award amount. And so, so we're looking at you based upon the responses to the questions and the information you've provided us, and we're not looking at the award amount. The second phase, part of the interview, we'll be asking some questions about award amount, and we'll enter into a conversation with you about that award amount. And then our advisory council will make the final decisions of the award amount, but we will be having those conversations with you. We are not expecting you to submit by the interview like a budget of how you would spend X amount of dollars or anything like that. We'll be asking questions about kind of like size of an award, but then after we kind of like look at the award amount and so forth, we will do that in a way that aligns and respects what the organization would like to go ahead and do if they're selected as part of this cohort. And like I said, we want to be able to also give organizations a lot of flexibility on how they use their award.
Okay, well, I think we have all of the questions that were in the Q&A answered either live or in the Q&A box itself. So I think that brings us to the end of Q&As, unless anybody is furiously typing right now to get their question in. Oh, yes, we have.
Do you want to open it up for any just verbal questions?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second. We have one more question that says, can you repeat the total time commitment for meetings and participation?
Again, it's about 6 meetings a year. And on average, each meeting will be about a half a day.
And in case you missed some of the questions or some of the answers, we will be putting a transcript together with like the most frequently asked questions once we get the webinar recorded towards the end of this week or next or early next week. So we'll have these resources available in written format. So
just to reiterate on that last question, just to maybe provide a little bit more specificity to that. The time commitment that I just gave you is for the joint cohort meetings and so forth. That doesn't mean to say, or by no means do I want to convey that that's the only time you'll need to be able to put into this project. You will have conversations with the staff. We will be having conversations with the LCFC staff. We'll be having conversations where you're at with things. So there'll be also other communication so that we know how best to support you along this journey. And so please don't think that it's just 6 meetings, maybe a year, half a day, that's it. No, that's kind of like with the cohort. Because what we're really looking to do here, I don't know of very many capacity building initiatives out there in our country that are specifically for Latino-led, Latino-serving organizations, and to provide the kind of flexibility that we're looking to be able to provide, and being able to look at this capacity building through a very culturally relevant lens, and looking at how we build our community. So as we bring this cohort together, it's also about how can this cohort also learn from each other, collaborate with each other, explore other ways of looking at their work. If we were to do this and just everybody went their own way at the end of 3 years, then I think we missed the big point. Because when we look at how do we really build up our Latino community overall in the state of Colorado, it's going to take a lot of folks coming together, working together to figure out how we do this. And for us, we see this also as a start of how do we start coming together, learning from each other, supporting each other, understanding the work of each other, and really building up this Latino nonprofit sector, okay, to do some really amazing things. And so you all have your individual journeys in your communities, but we also want to see how those journeys also can align with other stuff throughout the state, and how does not just your work, but your thinking, your thought leadership, how do we bring your thought leadership together also to explore different ways of moving our communities forward here in Colorado. So, this is a great opportunity for our community. We want to make sure that we harness the talents, the assets that exist out there, bringing them together, building upon that, and really showing how it is that we can come together and be able to make this project an ongoing project that we have here in Colorado. And it doesn't start and end with this pilot cohort, but that it starts here and that it continues for many, many, many years on down.
Thank you, Carlos. Let's see, I think we had one more question. Nope, no open questions. So again, a lot of the questions have been answered through text in the Q&A. If there are any members out there who have a question they'd like to share out loud, please use the participation features to raise your hand, and I will see that and let you turn your mic on. Okay, nobody is raising their hand, Carlos, so I think this can bring us to an end.
Well, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for your interest. Again, as we go down this path, it's also a learning path for us. We want to be able to support our community in the best ways possible. Look forward to receiving your letter of conocimiento for those of you who feel that this is a good fit for your organization at this time. And we'll move forward. So, muchas gracias. Very appreciative. Thank you. And look forward to seeing you or to reading your letter of conocimiento in the near future.